Welcome to Encyclopedia TV English. Today, we will present episode 3 of the World War I series. There was a German field marshal named Alfred von Schlieffen. He served as the commander of the German forces from 1891 to 1906. He had prepared a powerful war plan for the conquest of France. You know that war plans against enemy countries and even against allies are prepared during times of peace as well. In the same way, Commander Schlieffen prepared such a plan, which came to be known as the Schlieffen Plan. The plan was that German forces would not launch a direct attack along the French border. Instead, they would enter France from the northeast, advancing through Belgium. This attack would be carried out with such speed that before the French army could reorganize, German forces would reach Paris and take control of the capital.
In this way, the entire French army spread from Paris eastward to the German border would be encircled by the Germans and destroyed.
In other words, if everything went according to this plan, Germany would achieve a swift and decisive victory. The war would end quickly and military losses would be kept to a minimum. This plan was created by General Schlieffen. However, the reality was that although the plan was still alive in 1914, Schlieffen himself had already passed away. So the new commanders made some changes to his plan. One major change was that, according to the original plan, the Netherlands was also to be occupied, but in the revised version, this part was completely removed. Instead, the plan was to attack France through the small countries of Luxembourg and Belgium along France's border. Under this modified Schlieffen Plan, on August 2, German forces occupied Luxembourg. At the same time, Germany sent an ultimatum to Belgium, demanding permission for German forces to pass through Belgian territory. They warned that if this permission was not granted, they would be forced to take harsh action, in other words, to use force. However, Belgium's King Albert I refused to give Germany passage. Belgium was a neutral country in this war, and its neutrality had been guaranteed by Britain. This meant that if anyone attacked Belgium or tried to violate its neutrality, they would have to fight Britain. As soon as Belgium refused Germany, it asked Britain for help. Meanwhile, Germany had already declared war and sent its forces into Belgium. As a result, Britain was now forced to declare war as well. As soon as the formal declaration of war was made, the German army began implementing the Schlieffen Plan at extreme speed. According to the modified plan, it is important to remember that when the First World War began, tanks, armoured vehicles and fast military trucks were not yet in regular use by armies. Most military units travelled on foot or used horses for movement. Heavy artillery and machine guns were also pulled using horses, donkeys, and even dogs. Trains had also begun to be used for military transport, but their availability was limited because railway tracks did not exist everywhere. If the German army had possessed fast modern vehicles, the Schlieffen Plan might have unfolded exactly as it was envisioned. But due to the lack of modern transportation, the plan slowed down right at the beginning. When the German army attacked Belgium in order to advance toward France, their first major battle with the Belgian army took place at the city of Liège. Around this city, Belgian forces had constructed at least 16 strong forts. All of these forts were equipped with heavy artillery. From August 5 to August 16, Belgian forces put up a determined resistance against the Germans.
Thousands of soldiers were killed on both sides. The Germans carried out intense aerial bombardments on the city using airships known as Zeppelins. After 11 days of fierce fighting, the Germans finally captured the city.
After that, German forces continued advancing and succeeded in occupying another large region of Belgium. However, during this time, the British army had also entered Belgium via France, and French, British and Belgian forces launched large-scale attacks across southern Belgium and along the entire German border. This battle came to be called the Battle of the Frontiers. And despite all these attacks, German forces pushed them back and successfully entered France. In fact, in the Belgian city of Mons, the British army faced a confrontation with the Germans and suffered a severe defeat. The situation now was that the British and French forces, defeated on the Belgian front, were rapidly retreating into France. This withdrawal, by the standards of the time, was referred to as the Great Retreat. And the German forces pursued the retreating armies, advancing about 250 kilometres into France. Soon, they were standing roughly 40 kilometres east of Paris. Besides advancing through Belgium, German forces had also entered France directly from their own border. At this point, the war map looked like this. German forces had spread from Paris all the way to Switzerland, the neutral area between France and Germany at the time. Opposing them was the French army, which had taken up defensive positions, and according to the map, the British army was also present there. It seemed as if Paris would indeed fall into German hands within the 40 days of the Schlieffen Plan. The other implication was that the French and British forces could be completely encircled, as the map shows. After that, either the Allied powers would be forced to surrender, or their entire army would be destroyed. Here, it is important to keep in mind that Germany, Austria-Hungary, and their allies were called the Central Powers during the First World War.
Britain, France, Russia, and their allies were called the Allied Powers. So throughout this series, whenever we use the term Central Powers, it refers to Germany, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and their allies. When we mention Allied Powers, what it means Britain, France, Russia, and their allied countries. Now, the German forces had advanced so far that this was a terrifying situation for the Allied powers, France and Britain. Their morale was low. But at this moment, the highly confident German army made a major mistake, a mistake that would turn the tide of the battle. What happened was that when the Germans reached so close to Paris, they rearranged their military positions. As a result, a large gap of about 50 kilometers was created between German positions, as you can see on the map. Only a few German troops were present in this gap, which was insufficient to defend it from an enemy counterattack. Soon, the Allied powers discovered this gap. By this time, airplanes had been invented, and the French forces used many small propeller-driven planes for reconnaissance. These planes spotted the gap in the enemy lines and sent images to their high command. French and British commanders decided to take full advantage of this weakness and move their forces into the gap. This attack became known as the First Battle of the Marne. The Allied forces crushed the few German units in the gap, turning the German advance into a failure.
After this, the Allied forces also began attacking the German troops positioned on the right side of the gap, that is, toward the town of Verdun, away from Paris. At the same time, several Allied units moved northward and captured the bridges over the River Marne, directly behind the German army. If these units had spread out on both sides along the river, as you can see on the map, the German forces would have been completely encircled. In other words, while trying to encircle the Allied powers, the Germans themselves were now on the verge of being surrounded. The Germans now had only one way to escape this danger: to immediately capture Paris and cut off the enemy's supply lines. This was because all Allied supplies were coming from Paris. If Paris fell under German control, it would mean that the Allied powers spread across France would be paralyzed. To the east of Paris was the German First Army, and the city was very close to them. Opposing them, the defense of Paris was being carried out by France's Sixth Army. The German forces launched a massive attack on this French army, and it seemed that they would break through its lines and enter Paris at any moment. Seeing Paris in danger, on September 2, the French government moved all of its administrative staff from Paris to the city of Bordeaux, about 600 kilometers away. In other words, the government itself fled the city. Martial law was imposed in Paris. However, the city's military governor took a step that saved Paris from destruction.
What happened was that continuous reports were coming from the front saying that German forces were close to success and that reinforcements were urgently needed. In other words, additional troops had to be sent to the front as quickly as possible. At that time, there was no large-scale government transport available in the city, but there were about 600 taxis. In addition, there were some truck-like vehicles and trains. Gallieni ordered the taxi driver to immediately begin transporting soldiers from Paris to the front. Some truck-like vehicles were also used for this purpose. The taxi drivers began loading 4 or 5 soldiers into their cars and driving them straight to the battlefield. Within 1 or 2 days, around 6,000 soldiers reached the battlefields, and they arrived just in time. With their arrival, the enemy advance, the advance of the Central Power, Germany, came to a halt. The Schlieffen Plan, which aimed to capture Paris within 40 days, had failed.
What happened after the Schlieffen Plan? You'll have to keep waiting for the next episode to find out. Thanks for watching.